Hello, we're ready to go for our analysis of Villa-Lobos Prelude number 5. This was a request of a YouTube viewer and member. If you'd like to support the channel, you can become a member and get some bonus content, and I will also endeavor to answer your questions, to prioritize your questions as well. So really appreciate if you want to support that. But yeah, I really love questions too. So if you have questions, please let me know in the chat. I think it's really great to get your feedback and hear from you. What are you wanting more of? And oops, it looks like my stream is having a bit of difficulties. Let me know what you want more of, what topics you'd like to explore and that kind of thing. So, oh yeah, my internet's super slow right now. Why is it so slow? There we go, I think it's good now. So, without any further ado, what we're going to do is I'm going to play the prelude, and I'll play it a little bit sort of at a slower tempo, slower pace. Let me know if, am I coming through okay? Let me know if I'm coming through. Can you hear and see and hear me okay? I'm going to play through the prelude with the score. I think this is already a really great exercise for you to, if you want to learn to study music a bit more, analyze music. A really great starting point is to just listen to music, but listen and read the music while you're listening. What that does is it helps focus your attention. Your eyes will notice things, your eyes and ears will make connections that you otherwise wouldn't if you were just listening to the music. And I think it definitely helps you to focus a lot more. So, and you can come across lots of really interesting pieces with recordings with scores if you check out on YouTube. You know, any kind of piece, for example, Villa-Lobos with score, Beethoven with score, Mozart. There's lots of these videos now where you have the score as well. So I thought I'd do that for you here. Let's play, and then we'll dive into our analysis. But you know, the reason I'm doing this live is also to get questions and feedback. So please, if you have questions, comments, anything like that, please put it in the chat. So here we go. Prelude number 5. I will also be scrolling, so I'll be like stopping to scroll a little bit, but I'm just doing this so you can read and listen. Here we go. Prelude number 5. is our performance, our run through, playthrough of the Prelude. I did it a little bit slower than normal, not too slow so that it's sort of unrecognizable, but yeah, reading the score, listening. Did that open your eyes or ears to anything new? I'd love to hear from you in the chat or in the comments if you're watching this. So let's dive in. Now, before we look at the analysis I did, I just received an analysis that one of our members from the Creative Classical Guitarist did. So he started to analyze this. He got a good way in, very detailed analysis. I just want to show you what he's done because I think it's really neat. So, there we go. Let's see. It's a bit small, but hopefully you can see that. We zoom it in even more. So you can see there's a lot of detail here. We've got the form at the top there, and we've got lots of chord names here and the Roman numerals which represent the number chord in the key. We've got passing tones, accented passing tones. We've got some other observations, really fantastic analysis. We've got the harmony mapped out here, the form at the top. So this is an analysis by Kiem, who's a wonderful composer, and you know, he's a wonderful composer partly because he takes the study really seriously and loves to study things in detail like this. I think he's going to be studying the Chaconne by Bach really soon. And so we do a lot of that on the Creative Classical Guitarist. Lots of studying, lots of breaking down pieces to figure out what makes them sound good and how we can compose and be inspired by these pieces and how we can play them with deeper understanding. But that's really what analysis is all about. It's not just putting labels on the page. There needs to be a purpose to the analysis. Either it's to help inform your playing or to learn it faster or to understand it more, to bring it to life more, to be inspired by the structure the composers used, because as we'll see, Villa-Lobos was inspired by other composers as well. So I just wanted to showcase that one. I think that's really cool that I just received that just before starting the stream. Hello, Robin. Hey, thanks for joining, Robin. Okay, well, let's head to the analysis I've done. And now this is a very, if we're going to look at every single chord and every single note, it's going to take a long time. So what we're going to do instead is more of a sort of an overview, a bit more of an overview. Okay, so here we go. We've got our analysis ready to go. And this is what I recommend. This is a sort of a framework I recommend you, when you analyze a piece yourself, I recommend you start with the big picture of the piece and then work your way down slowly. And you can download in the video description, there's a link to an analysis guide. You can just download that right now, and that will give you some questions that you want to maybe ask when you're analyzing a piece, and some really basic tools to use, because a basic analysis is actually, I would argue, more important than a detailed one. A detailed one is very good once you've got the basic analysis worked out. So someone like Kiem, he can kind of go beyond that. He's very experienced, so he goes straight into the detail and it makes sense. But if you're new to analysis and you start looking at the details, there's that saying, you're gonna not see the forest for the trees kind of thing, right? You'll see all these notes and chords and things, and it won't really make sense. So I just want to preface it with that, and yeah, feel free to download the analysis guide. That the link is in the description. So here we go. What is a prelude? Well, so good question, I think, to ask first. What is a prelude? We have some composers, Bach and Chopin here, who, when you think of prelude, you probably think of the names Bach and maybe Chopin, especially if you're a pianist. Preludes began probably before the Baroque period, but they really were established as a very common form in the Baroque period, around the time of Bach and earlier. And they function as an introductory movement before a series of other movements, usually dances. So you probably know some preludes already. For example, the very famous that one by Bach. You might know some by Chopin as well, or some by other composers as well. Preludes were improvisatory. Sometimes they were actually improvised with through composed form, which means back in this kind of prelude, the structure was quite free. You didn't have like sections coming back and repeating and that kind of thing. It was more of just like a free flow. We had lots of arpeggios, sequences, and repeating motives, and you can hear that arpeggios and sequence. You hear that right in the opening. It's almost like the prelude of all preludes right there. Just that opening bit sort of represents what a prelude was very well in the Baroque period. Also, it has this moto perpetuo, this kind of like constant flowing motion in the rhythm. That's also quite a hallmark of a prelude too. Think of another prelude by Bach. That kind of thing, right? Very fast moving, perpetually moving, very exciting. Some of them are slower, but they still have that perpetual rhythm to them. Preludes did evolve over time though. So like many forms evolve over time, but the prelude especially, the prelude is a real example of how a form can evolve over hundreds of years. And in the Romantic period, so we're talking maybe 200 years later than Bach, largely from the influence of Frédéric Chopin, prelude started to become a standalone work. So you'd see a prelude, it's not the introduction. It's kind of strange because prelude to what? There's not a prelude to anything. It's just a standalone piece. But it took some of those features, maybe a bit of that free flowing, the repeating motives, that sort of, it took some of the older aspects of a prelude, but then we started to do some new things, like very often they would be in ternary form, and we'll see that this prelude by Villa-Lobos is also in ternary form. And I think that Villa-Lobos is very much in his preludes, he was inspired by Bach and Chopin very much. Maybe not in all the preludes, but certainly in many of the preludes and in many sections. There is obviously the famous in the prelude number 3, where you have the it's like an homage to Bach in that prelude. So Villa-Lobos is very much inspired by other composers, but I think what we all love about Villa-Lobos is that he wrote so well for the guitar, and he also infused some of that Brazilian rhythm and that Brazilian exotic kind of stuff to the music. So the later type of prelude is what Villa-Lobos based his preludes on. Many of them are in ternary form, if not all of them. I think the majority of the preludes, I think all of them are in ternary form. There's an A section and then a contrasting B section, and then it returns to the A section again. All right, so that's the first thing to look at. And when you analyze a piece, that's the first thing you want to look at. Try to identify the sections, the form, how many sections are there in the piece, and what key is each section in. Right, so Villa-Lobos uses ternary form, or ABA, with a transition before the final A section. Now Kiem had marked that as C, and that's totally fine. You could say it's A, B, C, A, C being another section. I'm labeling it as a transition. The A section is in D major, the B section is in B minor, the relative minor. The transition is in A major, which is the dominant. So how would you describe the mood of each section? This is really the conclusion you want to make. Because once you've identified the keys, the conclusion then is what is the mood? What's the character of the section? And the key really helps to define that. So if we look here, we've got the A section here in D major, and Villa-Lobos marked it poco animato, so a little bit animated. And I think D major is usually a good key for that, right? Right, a little bit animated there. So he's done that for us in that section, poco animato, D major, the A section. Then we go to the B section, the relative minor. Now Villa-Lobos just writes meno, which means like slower or less, slower tempo. And we're in B minor now, the relative minor of D major. So they share the same key signature as each other. It is really like day and night, the contrast. When we use the word relative, yes, they share the same key signature, but the function of the key change is usually night and day, or day and night. It's good to completely change the mood of the piece, and that's what we get here. So how would you describe? Let me know in the chat. How would you describe this? If you had to, animato, animated for the first section, what would you say for this one? Melancholic or lamenting, or the word you choose is really important, because if you say lamenting, then I'd probably play it like, or if you say, I don't know, poco angry, a little bit angry or upset or agitated. Maybe agitated could be a good word, Right? Either one, to me, I like both ways. I mean, it's hard to choose one, sometimes. There could be a mixture though. The section is quite long, so maybe the first part is lamenting, and then later on maybe it's agitated. But it's really important to make that conclusion. Don't just identify the key and leave it at that. Go the final step, make the conclusion. What is the mood? And then we get our transition, which is in A major, the dominant of D. Now, why would he use that key for the transition? Because it's the dominant of our A section. Our A section goes back to D, so that the dominant is a really great way to take us back. It transitions us nicely, transitions us smoothly back to the tonic. So that's what we have in this section. We're in the key of A major now. And you can see that in the key signature, right? We've got the 3 sharps there. So how would you describe the mood of this? Obviously, it's also, the word you use for the section doesn't mean the whole section is that mood, but generally, the mood. Obviously, there can be light and darken and lighten and brighten and everything during the section, but I think it's really helpful. I'd love to know. Let's see if we have anyone in the chat. Anyone? Robin and Kiem, hello. By not indicating the mood for section B, the composer leaves it up to us to decide. Yeah, isn't that really interesting? Yeah, but I'd love to know what you guys think. What are some words that come to your mind for the B section for this transition? Because the way, like excited maybe, or something, for this one. Play it very differently to if I said something like maybe carefree, right? That'd be a little bit different. A little bit bit different. Maybe it could start carefree and then make its way to excited, right? You can combine the words a little bit to create a story, and that's what it's all about. It's all about storytelling. The changes of keys, even not just from one section to another, but even within one section, we very often will have a story mapped out, and it really has a lot to do with changes of keys within sections and changes of harmony as well. That's what really helps to create a story. And then we go back to the A section to end. So those are our sections. That's our form, and those are our keys. Fairly straightforward. Not really anything groundbreaking or revolutionary, but done very, very well. You know, very, very beautiful, imaginative, awesome writing on the guitar, very guitaristic, from Villa-Lobos. Okay, so that's the form and the keys. That is, even if in your analysis, if you just get this far, that's great. That's a really great, start. Because now you've got the keys, you know what keys you've got and what mood each section's in, and it will probably help narrow down what sorts of chords you'd expect, but we'll go into that in more detail. Anyway, let me check if we have any other comments or questions. Love questions. Thanks, Robin and Kiems. Lovely to have you here. Okay, so next, after looking at the form and keys, we're going to look at the phrase structure next. And you might think that this is an odd thing to analyze. Maybe, when we think of analysis, I don't think very often phrase structure comes to mind. Usually chords come to mind. What chords do we get? That's usually what we think of. But phrase structure is actually the next level down. And as we'll see, there are really common types of phrase structures that we see, and we see them in this prelude as well. And if you've watched any of my analysis videos before, you'll probably hear me saying this term like a broken record, parallel periods, because they just happen in so many pieces. That's why parallel periods happen in so many pieces. So they're the most common type of phrase, I would say. So what a parallel period is a question and an answer. And they're usually 4 measures long for the question and 4 measures long for the answer. Sometimes they're 8 measures long for the question and 8 measures for the answer. Very often the dominant, the 5 chord, will occur at the end of the question, and the 1 chord will occur at the end of the answer. And to make it a parallel period, so everything I've said so far would describe a period, but to make it a parallel period, that's where we have this repeating material in the question and the answer. They have the same material. Isn't that great to have a chart? It just visually, I think hopefully that just makes it clear, because otherwise, if there's no clear chart, it can be hard to kind of visualize. So that's the parallel period. There, yeah. Now each section in this prelude, except the transitions of the A and the B and the A sections, use parallel periods, and that the sections are structured by means of the parallel periods, right? If you're thinking like, okay, Villa-Lobos has an A section, but how has he structured the A section? Because that's important too, right? And that's the way he's done it. He's used this thing called a parallel period. So here is the question and answer, and we see that it's a longer parallel period here. So the question goes up to measure 8 and it ends on the dominant chord on the A. You can see A in the bass, we're in the key of D, and then we get the answer, and that highlighted material is the repeating material from the question. And if we go 8 measures in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we're pretty much at the end of the section. So the A section is 16 measures long, 8 bar question, ending on the dominant, and then followed by an 8-bar answer, repeating some of the start of the question, ending on the tonic. That's the most sort of general way to describe what's happening in this section. Right? Let me play it for you so you can follow along. You can hear the parallel period. Okay, so. That's the end of the question, and now we get the answer. Change. And that's the one chord, tonic. That's what makes it feel like an answer, conclusive. The dominant, the A chord, makes it feel open, like it's a question. We need the answer. So there's other things that Villa-Lobos is doing. You know, I just after playing that, you guys might have realized maybe as well. He brings back this. So that is actually, I could almost use another highlighter here. Can I do that? I don't think I can, but I'll mark it out here in the same color in yellow. So this, the end of the question and the end of the answer are also very similar. And then he brings back this melody. Where does that come from? That's from the beginning. That's from that opening sort of melody there, and he's put it down into the bass. Now yellow is a very bad color to draw with, so I'm not going to use it. Let me use red. That's why we use red. It's so clear, so easy to see. So what was I pointing out? That, yeah. So this, the end of the question. That's better. The end of the question comes back towards the end of the answer, and then he uses that melody, which is drawn from the start, from that. So there's a lot of repetition, isn't there? That's a lot of repetition happening. That's what will often surprise you when you start to analyze phrasing, phrase structure. You'll see there's a lot of repetition, because we've got 1.5 measures there that are the same, and then approximately 50% of I'd say approximately 50% of the question is repeated in the answer, something like that. So it's quite a bit. Then we get our B section. Now this is a little bit different, still parallel periods, but smaller, shorter. Now we get four measure questions and 4 measure answers instead of 8. So now we have a 4 measure question. Very much that repeating rhythm too. Okay, so that's the question there, and then we get the answer. Goes off into a different direction. Then we get another parallel period. So now we have a new question. Or actually another period, I'll say here. And then he ends the period with this. Again, he's bringing back some of the end of, so this part here, that's kind of the end of the da 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 da, this bit, he's kind of brought that back again. It's like we get this kind of interruption here with these chords going up the fretboard, and then it goes back. Right, so very tightly constructed, right? But essentially we have we have a parallel period there, question and answer, they mirror each other. Here we've got a period, but there's still a lot of repetition. It's just not strictly a parallel period because we don't see this melody, we don't see that sort of coming back. And even this, this is, I marked this as yellow, it's very similar to this, but it's not the same because he keeps going up. In these ones, he stayed sort of static. So he's kind of hovering around there, but in this final period, in this final phrase here, he's gone. He keeps repeating it higher and higher. He's really building the intensity there. So it's really great, when you're studying phrase structure, is I think very underrated. You can learn so much from how music is constructed and how to interpret the music too, because phrasing is such a vital aspect of our interpretation. And you notice how I often will say, another broken record moment here for me, that guitar music does not have phrase markings. And so if you're a singer, pianist, violinist, cellist, whatever, flautist, oboist, whatever, like most instruments have phrase markings in their music, and we do not. Rarely do we. I don't think I've ever. Maybe one or two pieces that I've seen phrase markings, but it's extremely rare. So if I did put phrase markings over the music now, I'd say, okay, there's a very long phrase mark here for the question, but it would go all the way to there, and that, I think, for visually, that helps us, because then we see that, that's all one idea, right? And then we get the next idea, draw a large phrase mark all the way maybe to there, and then we get this sort of final phrase there. Yeah, it's down to interpretation, like Robin said earlier. The composer hasn't marked it, so it's our decision. Very often. But if you're aware of things like parallel periods, it gives you a framework to look for, a pattern to look for. Something, an expectation. I'm usually expecting parallel periods, and most of the time that's what we get. Yeah. So this one would be 4 measures there, ending, and then this one will be 4 measures there, ending, and then this one's a bit longer, but you might phrase it, and then you get this bit here, right? It's really important to mark this kind of thing in, and then you get that final phrase there, right? Now my score's looking a bit messy. That's partly why we don't see phrase markings, because guitar music does have fingerings and slurs and other markings, and sometimes it can get messy. So that's one reason we don't see it. But I would strongly suggest, even if you don't understand phrasing like terms like parallel periods or whatever, I would strongly encourage you to just do it intuitively. Just try and ask yourself, where does the phrase start and end? Mark it in your score. You'll probably see numbers divisible by 4, 4, 8, 12 bar phrases most of the time, but not always, and they won't always be symmetrical. Sometimes Villa-Lobos changes it up a little bit, as we can see. So yeah, that's, if you get, if you can get like some really quick takeaways here from the form and keys, if you can just say what's how many sections are there, what are the keys, what's the effect, that's great. And then from the phrase structure, if you can just say, where do the phrases start and end, and mark that into your music, mark that into the score, that will give your playing a sense of breath and, you know, cantabile, singing quality and life, really. It will really help. Okay, we got any? Yes, I've got Kiem and Robin here. Oh, string music. String music doesn't use phrase markings. Okay, I'm surprised. I thought string music would. But yeah, they've got bowing and other markings too. So yeah, it can get a bit crowded. It could be worth even, you know, printing out a clean score and just for the phrasing. You know, it's so crucial, because you know, the habit for a lot of guitar players, I think, if we start learning a piece like this, is we'll take each chord or each beat and we sort of treat it like, you know, the tendency can be to do that, and fair enough, because we're shifting all over the place and we're learning, we're reading it and that kind of thing, but we really want to transform that. Right, we want to transform that, and it's turning the words into sentences effectively, or even the letters. You know, these are like letters of the alphabet, really. And then, as you know, as maybe measures or progressions or whatever, they become words, but they become sentences when you start to see the phrasing. I think that's the really important part. Anyway. So, and then we have the transition. So the transition section is a bit different. It does not use parallel periods, and this is something I often see a lot as well. If something is not using a parallel period, there will still be forms of repetition. So it's still very tightly structured. We have sequence. So we hear this. And then we hear it again, but higher and, you know, with different chords. And then we get a fragment, what we just heard, sequenced again, that previous melody. And then he takes the repeating chord idea and builds on that. Right. So in terms of phrasing, if I had to put phrase marks to that, it would be probably something like that. Quite asymmetrical now. That, and then that. So that's how I would group it. You could do it differently if you wanted to. You might want to treat this one as part of that one still. You might want to treat this triplet run at the end as part of this phrase still. That's the beauty. You can that's some of it, a lot of it's down to interpretation. So that's the phrasing. So we see the use of parallel periods, and it's really structuring the sections, especially the A and the B sections. Although, as many good composers do, he's not just using parallel periods like, you know, the clean textbook way. He's kind of playing around. He's having a bit of fun with the phrase structure, bringing back ideas. You know, he brought this idea back. You know, in the bass. That's the idea. That's the melody from the beginning. He's put it at the end, down the octave. It's a little different. You don't always see that. And there's other things too. This interruption of these chords here, and then these beautiful sequences. Good. Why not? You know, just have a section in the transition. Do something different. Don't do another parallel period. Otherwise, maybe that gets a bit too predictable. So it could be the rule of threes. That's a very common thing in composition, the rule of threes. If you typically don't want to repeat something 3 times in a row, or maybe 3 times is the maximum. I don't remember which one it is, if it's not to repeat them 3 times or if 3 times is the maximum, but the rule of threes could have a part to play. So yeah, so we've got some comments here. The melody with the smaller note values act as a bridge to the next set of crotchets, so accelerando would be fine for these bridging bars. Yeah, I think Robin, that's Robin in the chat, I think, talking about these passages here. Yeah, there you go. So that could be another, okay, so here you go. So you could think of the phrasing like this instead. You have that, and then this could be like part of that instead, right? Quite different. Something like that. That feels totally fine to do that way as well. That's the beauty of music and interpretation, is it's open to interpretation. As long as you come up with, try something out. Come up with a conclusion. Try it out and see what you think. If you're convinced, you'll probably convince the listener. So. All right, thanks guys. And more comments we have here, some from Kiem. So I think Kiem's agreeing about phrase structure, that we don't tend to include phrase structure in analysis. Guitar music does not have a habit for phrase markings. Composers writing for other instruments than the guitar usually ask me to put phrase marking, if possible, in his guitar scores. There you go. See, it is so common. It's very, very common to have phrase markings. But if you don't see phrase markings, here's the conclusion for this section of our analysis. Put phrase markings into music. And I think it's such a simple act to just write a line, write a bunch of lines in your score, but it has a profound impact. Just as to identify sections and keys and try to describe the mood, it can be just one word, 1 or 2 words. That can also have a profound impact on how you interpret and understand the music. All right, so there's the 2 parts of our analysis. I'll just quickly, just to recap a bit. Form and keys, right? So it's ternary form, A, B, A. We have a transition before the return of the A section. Right, so that's what we saw there, and then we saw lots of parallel periods in the A and the B sections. Although Villa-Lobos is being a bit, playful with the phrasing, we saw sequences in the transition. So putting phrase markings in is really helpful. Okay, so now the final thing I'll talk about for today is the harmony. And I'm not going to attempt to analyze every single chord because that would be very useful. But what I want to do instead is, because I think harmony can very often be seen as maybe overly complicated, I want to try and give you a more simple framework. Don't forget, you can download the analysis guide in the video description. There's a link where you can download the analysis guide free, and I sort of list a lot of these different things that I'm talking about today. So notice how we're zooming in, right? We started with the big picture, the sections, then we looked at the phrase structure, and now we're looking at chords and progressions as well. So what we want to look for when we're studying harmony are the primary chords, because the 1, 4, 5, 1 chords just happen to be used a lot. They're just used a lot in music, and there's some reasons for that. just very quickly, I mean, if you think of the circle of fifths, the primary chords are all kind of next to each other, so they help to establish a key very well. The notes of the chords, if you put all of the notes of the chords together, so if we say D major is D, F sharp, and A, and then G major is G, B, and D, and then A major is A, C sharp, and E, you end up with all of the notes of the scale there. So D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. So we have all of the notes of the scale, all 7 notes of the scale found just in 3 chords. That's partly why they're so useful. That's probably why they're called the primary chords. Yeah, so most pieces use these chords under the surface. Now, the tricky part is that, especially with more advanced pieces, you have to use a technique called chord substitutions to identify the primary chords, but hopefully we can unpack that a bit today. Looking at the bass line can give you a really good clue as to what chord you're looking at. Passing tones are also used for great effect in this prelude. Passing tones can also be a bit of a tricky one. They can sometimes lead us astray when we're trying to identify chords. I can't go into too much detail because passing tones is quite an elaborate. The study of passing tones is quite an elaborate topic. We are covering passing tones. We just recently covered passing tones. We still are a little bit on the Creative Classical Guitarist right now in our Foundations program. So if you're part of CCG, feel free to come along and watch the recordings that we've had recently of those sessions. And if you want to learn more about passing tones and chord substitutions and analysis and all that kind of thing, you're welcome to join the Creative Classical Guitarist anytime. There's an app, great community. You've got people like Kim and Robin who are in the chat composing wonderful pieces and contributing so well to the community. So let's talk about chord substitutions first. I want to try and get a bit of a help you to grasp the concept of a chord substitution, and hopefully this chart. And this is also the contribution of another CCG member, Jamal. He drew up this chart here. So kudos, bonus points and kudos for Jamal for this. This is an awesome resource here. Yeah. So what we have here, you see the notes of the scale. So we've got D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and then D, and then we just keep going. So the notes of the scale are kind of zigzagging like that, right? Now when we do that, we're splitting the scale into our different chords here, because chords are made from thirds, so we're skipping. So the top row, we have a series of chords there. So that's our 1 chord, D, F sharp, and A. And then we go to the bottom row, E, G, and B. That's our 2 chord. And then our 3 chord will be F sharp, A, and C sharp. And our 4 chord will be G, B, and D. And our 5th chord will be A, C sharp, and E. And our 6th chord will be B, D, and F sharp. And now finally our 7th chord will be C sharp, E, and G. Those are the chords of the scale, right? Every scale degree, every note of the scale is given a chord. So that's how we do it. Again, we've done this in Foundations. So Robin and Kiem and any other CCG members watching, if you go to the Foundations group, you should find this, or let me know if you want a copy of this chart. So that's how we get our chords. So we have chord 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now Jamal has marked out the primary chords here in bold, in big Roman numerals, 1, 4, and 5, which is awesome. So how do chord substitutions work? A chord substitution is basically when chords share similar notes to each other. So for example, the most common chord substitution is probably the 4 chord. So in the key of D, our 4 chord is the chord of G. That's our chord, right? That's our chord number 4, G. That's the notes G, B, and D. If I wanted a substitute for the G chord, let's say I want that kind of chord but a slightly different flavor, right? Like if I go 1 and then 4 and then 5 primary chords, right? If I want a similar effect but a slightly different flavor, I can just go back to the 2 chord here, and I can take these 3 notes, E, G, and B, that shares 2 notes in common with the G chord. However, it's a minor chord, so I can go, and now I get 1, 2, 5, 1. 2 is acting as a substitute for the 4 chord. I could go the other way, and I could go from here. I could go B, D, and F sharp, and that's the 6 chord. So now I can go D, B minor, A, right? Similar progression, different flavor. It's really nice that I'm getting minor chords now instead of always having major chords too. So that's one of the powerful things about chord substitutions, is you're able to get different flavors of chords instead of always using the stock standard ones. But it kind of always comes back to 1, 4, 5, 1, and we'll see how Villa-Lobos does this. Now in chord substitutions, odd numbered chords tend to substitute each other and you can see why, because these will share notes with each other, right? These will share notes with each other, and even numbered chords tend to substitute each other. So 1, 3, 5, 7 for the odd, 2, 4, and 6 for the even. They tend to substitute each other really well, and these tend to substitute each other really well. With the 5 chord, I'd say it's most common is those 2. So 5 and 7 tend to be essentially the same chord. If you see a 7 chord, it's usually functioning as a 5 chord. If you see a 2 chord, it's usually functioning as a 4 chord, and if you see a 6 chord, it's usually functioning as a 4 chord. That only leaves, 1 is the 1. 1 is 1. There's usually no substitute for 1 because it's the 1 chord. It's the home chord. You could substitute it, this way with a minor, but it's going to sound so different if you do that. These chords sound different, but not so different, if you know what I mean, right? They're like the similar flavor, but a slightly different shade of it, right? Or the same flavor but a different shade of the flavor, right? So that's pretty much how chord substitutions work. That's a very, very fast, quick explanation. So I apologize, that's the best I can do in a short amount of time though. So let's see how this works in Villa-Lobos in the Prelude. So what this does now is it simplifies the harmony tremendously, right? Simplifies the harmony tremendously, because now I'm just looking at the bass line and I'm looking at, okay, what chords are we expecting the primary chords? So we have the 1 chord, the D in the bass. Now I would call the rest of that, the melody there, I'd call them passing tones, right? Passing tones. Non-accented passing tones to be specific. Okay, and then we get this. Now I said earlier that Villa-Lobos uses passing tones to great effect and uses a lot of passing tones. So that's also a passing tone. That's an accented passing tone. I'm just trying to point this out because if you try to analyze everything like that, as though harmony doesn't always function that way. I mean, you can think of it that way, but yeah, we're going to call that a passing tone, and that resolves here, and that creates our A chord. So we have a D chord, passing tones, and then passing tone resolved to the A. And now we go to B minor. You see the B in the bass, B minor, and then passing tones again, sort of passing, and then there we get a nice chord. Actually, that could be, I wrote C sharp diminished, that could also be E minor, actually, now that I think about it. because if that's a passing tone, there's no C sharp in the chord, and therefore we have the notes E, G, and B, like that, creating E minor. Okay, now we're talking about a pretty advanced piece here, so analyzing the harmony is not going to be super straightforward. In some pieces, the harmony is just mapped out. Something like this, right? There's not many passing tones in the Bach prelude, but in this prelude there are a lot of passing tones. You don't see, and I was even a bit, I kind of overlooked that. So that could be E minor instead. And then we get and it's got E in the bass, makes sense, huh? E minor. So we're just looking at the bass notes. D in the bass is D major, A is A, so that's 1, that's 5. B minor, that's the 6 chord. And then E minor, that would be not the 7 chord, but that would be the 2 chord. That would be the 2 chord, right? The second note of the scale, second chord in the key. And then we get the A chord there again and the A chord there again. So the bass is very often such a big clue. It's the foundation often of the harmony. So how does this all relate to the primary chords? Well, we're seeing 1, 5, 6, 2, and then 5 again. Now remember, even numbered chords substitute with each other. So 6 and 2, B minor substitutes for G, because you have 2 notes in common with G. And then the 2 chord, E, G, B, substitutes for the G chord as well. So we're seeing the primary chords unfold here at the beginning. And we get a similar, in the second line here, we get a similar series of chords. We're going D, B minor, G, E minor, with A in the bass. And then we get this beautiful chromatic line. The B in the middle voice there turns into a C, and then that turns into a C sharp. Okay, and so that's producing pretty much still the primary chords and the substitutions for 6 for the 4 chord and 2 for the 4 chord there. So we get again different flavors of those chords, right? So that's how the primary chords are working in this section. I could continue to do a more in-depth analysis of the next section, but I'll instead do more of an overview of the B section. So now we go to the key of B minor. So our primary chords change now. All of our chords change. We have B minor. So here's B minor. So B, D, F sharp. That's our 1 chord. B, D, F sharp. Our 2 chord will be C sharp, E, and G. Our 3 chord, D, F sharp, and A. Our 4 chord, E, G, B. Our 5 chord, F sharp, A sharp, C sharp. Our 6 chord is G, B, D. And our 7th chord, diminished, is A sharp, C sharp, and E. A sharp diminished. I'll just want to point out also that these Roman numerals give us quite a bit of information. So lowercase means minor, uppercase, like this one, is major, lowercase with a little degree, little circle, is diminished, and the plus sign is augmented. So those are our types of chords. They're represented by Roman numerals. So our 1 chord's B minor, B, D, F sharp. Our 4 chord is E minor, E, G, B. By the way, there's lots of exercises where you can practice the primary chords of every key. And our 5 chord is F sharp, A sharp, C sharp. That's F sharp major. So we have B minor, E minor, F sharp, and then B minor. That's what our primary chords sound like in minor. Okay. All right. See you later. Robin's got to head off. See you later, Robin. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so what are our substitutions? We can just look to the chart. So our 2 chord and our 6 chord will substitute for the 4 chord. So C sharp, a C sharp chord, C sharp diminished, will substitute for the E minor, and G major will substitute for E minor. All right, so if we look at our chords here, we're actually getting mostly the actual primary chords now. We get the 1 chord and then the 4 chord E minor, B minor, E minor, and then we get F sharp, the 5 chord, and then B minor again. Right, so there we get another example of the primary chords occurring. So I think as a starting point, it's, you know, obviously I wouldn't recommend, if you're new to analysis, I wouldn't recommend analyzing a piece like this in terms of the harmony. I think you need a bit of a course in harmony first. It's like trying to study German if you don't know German, you know what I mean? So a bit of a course in harmony will be very helpful. There's tons of stuff online for free. I will mention though that I have put together, a program in the Creative Classical Guitarist called Foundations, which goes through all of these topics that we're talking about in detail with some really quick little tasks that are all practical, and Kiem has done many of these tasks very, very beautifully, and has actually composed a lot of pieces, spurred by the tasks too. So this is the Creative Classical Guitarist here, giving you a little sneak peek at CCG. So this is the Foundations program, and when I say a course in harmony, this is, I think, what's helpful. I think first of all, learning the rudiments of music, how to read and write music. These days we've got programs like MuseScore, which is free, so you can write this, like if you want to write down what I think, this is what I believe a course in harmony would, an effective course in harmony would be for you. Rudiments of music, first of all, knowing how to read and write music, and using notation software to do that. So MuseScore is great, it's free, it's a wonderful, very powerful program. Then you want to know triads, because triads are the foundation of harmony. We also do cover other things like phrase structure and basic form and that kind of thing as well. I think that's really important in the, while you're studying triads and the rudiments of music. Then we go into 7th chords, more extended harmony. Then we go into chord substitutions next. It's almost like a harmony textbook. This is pretty much how a harmony textbook would be mapped out. Chord substitutions, then modulation. By the time you get there, if you understand all those things, the rudiments of music, some basic forms, some phrase structures, triads, 7th chords, chord substitutions, modulation, you will then have the ability to analyze just about anything, because those are the different components of music. In a piece of music, they're all working together, they're all happening, it's like one big mushy thing, right, that's happening. So it's important to understand them and study them separately, and then you see how they come together in composition. And that helps you to compose as well. It helps you to understand music, and it also helps you to compose. And then in the course on CCG, we do some advanced tools. So we go into melodic development, modes, things like that. And then we, to cap the program off, you write an Allemande in the style of Bach and Kiem and many other members. There are dozens and dozens of Allemandes now that have been composed. So you're writing a piece in the style of Bach, and that's it's awesome. You learn so much when you model a great composer. So that's what I mean when I say a course in harmony. I think it's really important to find some kind of, whether it's a textbook or a series of videos or a course, online course, or a class, or CCG might be an option for you as well. I just wanted to mention that because I think you just can't, like I said, it's like if you don't know German, you can't study German. You just need to take the course. You need to dive into the language. Immersion is also really great too, and that's something we do on CCG. Like all of our events, we have lots of live events and workshops, and there's plenty of books and materials and recordings and courses and everything, so you get fully immersed. When you start to be fully immersed, it's just like learning a language. If you're dropped off in a foreign country where no one else speaks English, everyone's speaking German or Italian or French or whatever, you're going to pick up that language very quickly because you're immersed in it. And I think it's very much the same with music as well. So do we have any other questions? Kiem's heading off too. Thanks for being here, Kiem. Well, I think we might wrap it up there. So I'll just a quick summary of what we went through here, because that concludes the analysis. I can't really go into like chord by chord, blow by blow account of this piece. It would take a long time to do that, and I don't think it necessarily makes sense to do that. It's very good for you to do that when you're studying music, identify each chord. But for me to just tell you this is this chord and this is this chord and this is this chord, I don't see as much benefit. I'm trying to give you instead frameworks that you can use when you analyze music yourself. So let's go back here. So we talked about what a prelude is. It evolved over time. It started as an improvisatory opening movement to a suite, and then eventually it evolved into a standalone piece, usually in ternary form in 3 parts, A, B, A, and that's exactly what Villa-Lobos has done. We saw the form A, B, A, the A section in D major, and then the B section in B minor, the relative minor, the transition in A major, the dominant, and then we go back to the A section in D major, and we want to think about the mood of each section, try to describe the mood of each section. And then the phrase structure, we saw parallel periods, one of the most common phrase structures around, where we have a question and an answer with repeating material. And that's what we saw here. The highlighted music there is the repeating material. We also saw Villa-Lobos having a lot of fun with that. The main takeaway, the main conclusion with that is to mark your score with phrase markings. And you can just do that intuitively, but you want to be watching probably for 4 measures and 8 measures. Every 4 measures or every 8 measures, usually an idea will end. So that's that. And then in the transition, we saw some different things going on there with more sequences used. And then finally, we discussed the primary chords 1, 4, 5, 1. So we have those being used in most pieces, and very often, especially in the more complex, sophisticated, higher level pieces, we see a lot of chord substitutions as a way to get different flavors out of the primary chords. Looking at the bass line can be really helpful. So if you look at the bass line, think about what key you're in, what are the primary chords of that key. Look at the bass line, and if the bass line matches the primary chords, you've probably got a match. That's probably what the chord is. You also need to be aware of passing tones as well. Passing tones meaning chords that don't belong, notes that don't belong to the chord. Okay? Well, that was a ripper. There was a lot, there was a lot there that we covered in a very short amount of time. We packed, I think, many months of study into an hour here. So I hope that was helpful. And please do let me know what you'd like me to do next week. You know, improvisation or more on composing. I often get people saying composing, another piece to analyze. Let me know. Otherwise, I can come up with a topic myself. And yeah, hope this was helpful. And don't forget to download the analysis guide. It's in the video description. You can ask questions anytime. Just leave a comment. Love to hear from you. Thanks so much.